talked a lot about thermal hubs and how important they are, how to identify them, how to hunt them, and how to scout them. Now I'm going to talk about a term that's not as familiar to most hunters, but it's something I think most people hunt without realizing it, and that's topographical hub. If we think about the thermal hub as an area that a buck uses to travel undetected and to gain intelligence and to do certain specific activities, rut related or scent related, that we have to think about the topographical hub as that buck's main operating base. I think a lot of times hunters that hunt these big woods, mountainous, rugged areas fall into the belief that the mature bucks that live within these areas roam around the topography and bed randomly based off of a little bit of security cover or a little safety feature or something like that, and they have no real home. And there could be nothing further from the truth. Most times these bucks that live in these areas have a home base that they spend a majority of their time in, and usually that is your topographical hubs. Those are usually the locations that these bucks are reverting back to at the end of the day to bed in, to stay in, and to begin all of their activities from. So what makes a topographical hub and how do you identify them? Well, a topographical hub is nothing more than a series of ridges that connect to a central point. If we think of a topographical hub in the term of of almost like a town square, where you've got multiple ridges going in multiple directions that all connect to a central area or a central point. And maybe that point is not directly in the middle. Maybe they connect along a line of a central point. But at some point in time, these ridges all come together, and that creates the hub. Now, what makes them so important? If you've got all these different secondary ridge points and ridge points themselves going in multiple directions, and they're meeting up with other ridge points that are going in the opposite direction from the opposite side, where they meet will create a thermal hub. So joining one topographical hub, you can have multiple thermal hubs that are connected to it. So that's why these topographical hubs are so important, because a buck can use this topographical hub as a home base, and especially because these bucks, as they get older, they learn to really conserve energy. Being able to have a home base that's connected to 3 or 4, maybe 5 different thermal hubs, you're able to conserve energy using that topographical hub as your home base to visit all these different thermal hubs. So what's the value in hunting these topographical hubs? And this is where size comes into factor. And by size, I mean the size of a mature buck's home range and the size of the topographical hub that you're identifying. So when we think about a really mature buck's home range, say one that's over 4.5 years old, once they get in that 5.5, 6.5, 7.5 and up, their home ranges begin to dramatically shrink. We're talking going from 700 to 900 acres down to 200, 300, 400 acres. So now we're taking a topographical hub that's in that, say, 70 to 90 acre range, and we're taking that in, putting that in his home range. And now I'm telling you that within that home range, within that 300 or 400 acre home range, this mature buck is spending 70, maybe 80% of his time in a 70 to 90 acre area of that home range. So there's your value right there. You've got the knowledge that a buck's home range is shrunk down at this point in time, 300 or 400 acres, and you've identified a 75 acre topographical hub. You don't need to know what the rest of his home range is. You can take that 75, 80 acres, 90 acres with the knowledge that he's probably spending 70%, 80%, possibly 90% of his time on that topographical hub within his home range. It's a lot less daunting of a task to think about scouting 75, 80 acres and have that much knowledge of an area, instead of looking at it from I've got to cover 500-600 acres and learn everything I can within that 500 or 600 acres to kill this buck, when you can take a quarter of that or less um, of that acreage out of the equation and say, let me learn this uh, 65, 70, 80 acres very intimately. Let me learn how to access this. Let me learn what the buck is doing in this 60, 75, 80 acres. And that makes the task of trying to kill a mature buck, or any buck for that matter, a lot less imposing. So there's not a topographical hub that holds a mature buck hiding behind every tree. And how you find these specific home-based topographical hubs, you've been doing a lot of scouting down in those bottoms. Down in those thermal hubs is where you're going to find a lot of your sign. You're more than likely going to have soft ground, creek bottoms, things like that allow you to find big tracks, old historical rubs, scrapes, things like that, that'll lead you to believe that there's a mature buck using those areas. And then you work your way back up into the ridges and locate these topographical hubs and work together to see how those thermal hubs and those topographical hubs work in conjunction with each other. And a lot of times these topographical hubs like this, they hold bucks historically. So year after year after year, you can have a mature buck using these type of areas because they can repeat the same behavioral patterns year after year after year. So these can become historical places that you can bank on year in and year out to hold a big mature buck in. So one of the things I'm going to do when I identify one of these hubs, I'm going to look at it in CalTopo with a shaded relief, slope angle shading, and the 10-foot contours. It's going to give me a good idea of all the little terrain subtleties that are on these hub systems. And then I'm going to show you a little trick that'll help out a lot for identifying when and how to approach these topographical hubs. Maybe when you're thinking about hunting them, give you a better idea of timing these approaches, timing your access, and timing your hunts. And I'm going to look at the sun exposure. So sun exposure in CalTopo can give you a wealth of information, and especially when you're dealing with these elevation rises on these topographical hubs, really helps to know where that sun is hitting at different points of the day. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to my map layers, and I'm going to scroll down until I see the sun exposure. So I'm going to click on sun exposure. I'm going to set it for November because that's when I intend on hunting. I'm going to set it for 9 a.m. Mid-morning. We'll see what that sun is doing in that mid-morning time frame. That gives me information for the morning so I can make a plan to hunt or anything like that. So when this thing populates, you're going to see that a lot of this hub is covered in sunlight, and I've just got a few areas that are still shaded. So I don't have much area by this time of the morning that doesn't have sunlight on it. So a lot of this area is going to be heating up, and you're going to have these rising thermals with just a few shady spots left. So that gives you an idea that you're going to have a lot of rising thermals all over this whole entire hub system right here. And with that knowledge, you can build a plan to hunt in certain areas, knowing that your thermals are probably going to be going up and not falling down into those valleys and into that thermal hub that is kind of surrounding this area. So now I'm going to take a quick glance at midday, see what it looks like. I can assume that by now the entire hub is probably going to have sunlight, at least hitting part of it. And as you can see right here, 12 o'clock midday in November, you're going to have sunlight covering this entire hub. So now we're going to go out to 4:30. We're going to go take a look at what's going to happen in this mid-afternoon time period. And once this populates, I think we're going to see a different story. And in fact, yeah, we got a few areas that are starting to pop with that purple. That's letting me know that that's probably going to be areas that's going to start to initiate that thermal drop. So now we're going to jump ahead to 5:30 and see what it looks like, and guarantee it's going to have a different look. Once this thing populates, I guarantee we're going to see a lot of purple. And indeed, this thing is pretty much covered in purple, except for that sliver up on that higher elevation point along that southwest side that's covered in sunlight. So by now, you've got falling thermals in all of those thermal hubs that are around this topographical hub have all filled up uh, with the falling thermals. So where would a buck be at this time of day? Where is he more than likely going to be headed to? And where can you put yourself, or where could you have put yourself knowing that this is what it's looking like in that magical hour just before that last hour before sunset? This is a really, really cool, really useful piece of information to have when you're scouting or hunting and looking at topographical hubs like this. Make sure to check out this tool on CalTopo and use it to your advantage to be able to plan to hunt an area like this. So make sure when you're e-scouting your topographical hubs that you don't pigeonhole them to look a certain way. This right here is a perfect example. This doesn't fit the mold of a topographical hub, but this one holds two big mature bangers. Two 5.5 to 6.5-year-old bucks are using this Topo Hub in conjunction with each other. Both of them will probably be pushing that 150 to 160. So when you look at this one, you see a massive amount of terrain diversity packed within about 130-acre hub itself. So you've got so much going on in an area like this. You have to do a lot more homework and really just don't pass up areas like this. And they don't all look the same. Here's another one that's holding a big mature buck as well. Just so much going on. And then you got them that look just abnormal. Not all the hubs are made the same. Some are mundane. Some are innocuous. You can't even tell that it's a hub. You just it's almost relying on the feel for what you're looking at. But when you're looking at these hubs, they're not all going to look like that. Like that roundabout or like that town square. A lot of them are going to look completely innocuous. You just got to look past that. And just requires a keen eye to focus on the massive amount of terrain differences you can have in these type of hubs. So